Since the Port Arthur massacre, in which 35 people died at the hands of Martin Bryant. Despite a spate of other mass murders across the globe since then, Tasmania's tragedy still stands as the world's worst ever killing spree by a lone gunman. Bryant's 11th hour guilty plea spared victims' families the trauma of a full trial, but it also left many questions unanswered. Now 2 Australian journalists have written a book investigating the forces that shaped Martin Bryant. Deborah Cornwall reports.
Do you think you'll be playing with firecrackers anymore?
Yes.
Don't you think you've learned a lesson from this?
Yes, but I'm still playing with it.
This odd exchange with the 12-year-old Martin Bryant is a rare insight into the defiant little boy who would grow up to be the deadliest lone gunman in the world.
Here's the gunshot.
How's things going in there, mate?
Fine, couldn't be better, just like on a Hawaiian holiday.
Hawaiian holiday?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
Bryant went there with the intention of dying, but dying in what he regarded as a blaze of glory.
In a new book on Martin Bryant, journalists Robert Wainwright and Paula Totaro have returned to the tragedy 13 years on, piecing together the jigsaw of forces that led to the making of a mass murderer.
There are a myriad of reasons that all come together in one terrible moment.
The authors interviewed 5 of the world's leading forensic psychiatrists, posing the question, was Bryant born a killer or could he have been stopped?
There were signposts all the way along. Well, as a child he responded violently, he hit, he pinched, he was unpleasant, he said horrible things.
Right from the start, Bryant's blonde good looks had been strangely at odds with the dull, spiteful boy who had no friends.
People who met him saw this strikingly handsome, blonde, blue-eyed, strapping young man and expected something mildly intelligent out of his mouth when he spoke. Instead, they got a simpleton.
Bryant's psychiatrist, Professor Paul Mullen, says his parents always knew he was different but refused to accept it.
He never did receive the kind of support and help which you would hope would be offered to an intellectually disabled young child.
As a toddler, Bryant's mother had tied him to a leash in an effort to control him, but his parents' decision to send him to a normal school made Bryant's life hell, and theirs.
What you were left with by the time he reached adolescence was a mixture of a very angry young man who'd been bullied and rejected, plus a young man who still had a grandiose sense of his own worth.
Bryant's father, Morris, would spend his whole life trying to keep his son out of trouble, even giving up his job as a wharfie to set up a small vegetable growing business with Martin. But in the end, it wore him out.
His father committed suicide, from what we understand, from the sheer burden of trying to keep this kid, who he loved but he knew could become dangerous, on a leash.
Just 10 months before his father's death, Bryant had also lost another great supporter, Helen Harvey, a local eccentric, an heiress to the Tattersalls fortune.
She was a lady who clearly was looking for a child substitute. And what better child substitute than Martin Bryant, who had the emotional and intellectual age of a 5-year-old, and essentially she adopted him.
Bryant was suddenly a very wealthy man, but lonelier and more dangerous than ever.
So what this young man did was to use his money to buy himself long-haul international airfares, and he was literally flying backwards and forwards to the UK so that he could fix on some poor soul in the next business class seat to have a conversation with.
Bryant's doomed attempt to find new friends would continue for 2 more years, all the way up to the last hours, even minutes before the massacre. Heading towards Port Arthur, he'd made 5 stops along the way, buying small things he didn't need, like tomato sauce and a cigarette lighter.
It emerges that one of the reasons that he was stopping was that he was hoping that something or somebody would turn him around, would give him a reason not to go ahead with what he had planned. A kind word. It ended apparently over a cup of coffee with a tourist. The man ignored him, and for Martin Bryant, the world had been given its last chance.
There's somebody going crazy shooting people here.
Bryant was ultimately captured after police negotiators stalled on his demand for a helicopter.
Have you done any training to become a pilot?
No.
I'm sorry?
You can buy a helicopter. I've got the money. Don't you understand? I've got the money. I've got all the wealth I want.
All right.
Right?
Okay.
What's the time now?
Previously unpublished interviews between Bryant and his lawyer, John Avery, revealed he had no memory of his crimes, but later revelled in reading the witness statements.
He didn't register blood. You could see that there was no empathy, that the horror of what occurred around him was like a cartoon for him.
Since his incarceration, there have been scant details on Bryant's life. Kept in isolation, he has made 6 known suicide attempts and refuses nearly all visitors, even his mother.
Martin Bryant of today is an obese, shambling shell of a human being who lives his life largely in isolation, saying little, enjoying nothing. Even the most vindictive and revenge-minded citizen could not wish for a punishment greater than Martin Bryant is now suffering.